What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. This is Legitical Response. We cover political news, in case you didn't know. Now, right now, currently, as we speak, Tim Walz is getting just blasted into oblivion, right? This is very good for the Trump campaign. Very, very good for the Trump campaign. Tim Walz's record is being put on blast. Things he said in the past is being put on blast. You thought it was bad for J.D. Vance. Oh yeah, look at what's going on. Just go to X and look at all the discourse going on, all the excoriations of Tim Walz that's going on X right now. It's outright insane. And the corporate press, in their infinite wisdom, is picking up the mantle to place this guy up and try to fact check all of this stuff, and they're doing a very poor job, and that's what we're covering today. Let's get into it. Vance reopens line of attack into Walz's military record as two veterans now vie to be vice president. Oh yeah, this is great, y'all. Donald Trump's running mate, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, stepped up his attacks on Minnesota Governor Tim Walz's portrayal of his military career, accusing him without evidence of ducking service in Iraq when he left the Army National Guard and ran for Congress in 2005. You just gotta love that. I talked about this in the last video. This is what the corporate press does. They'll just say without evidence to make you think that it's false. But if you think about that statement for a second, when they say without evidence, right? Like, I just said that without evidence as a matter of fact, but we know it's true because we know that they do that all the time. We know that you can make a statement of fact and not bring any evidence. That doesn't mean it's not true. So when they say this, it makes you doubt in your mind right quick that, hang on, is it false? Is he lying? Well, he's a politician. He must be lying. If they're saying without evidence, well, he didn't bring any evidence, so it must not be true. That's how they get you, folks. That is the lies of the corporate press. And this is, I stress this point on a constant basis because people need to see these things. People need to see what the corporate press does, how they manipulate you into thinking the way that they do. That is what the media has turned into, the mainstream narrative machine. That's why I call them that, because they are mainstream. They are supposed to be the bringers of facts, and they twist the facts, and they skew the facts, and they make you think this when it's really that. And I'm getting sick and tired of seeing all this, because why can't they just be honest? Why put your activism in front of journalism? For crying out loud, right? Like, these people are supposed to be journalists. They're supposed to let you know what's going on, right? They're supposed to bring the news and give you the facts, and that's it. If they want to give you an opinion, you go ahead and do that, but put it in an opinion section, not in a news section, right? Because like this show, this is an opinion. Everything I do is an opinion. I'll give you the facts and then give you my opinion. Right? I won't try to persuade you from thinking the way you want to think. I won't try to force you to think the way you want to think. I won't force you to think the way I want you to think. Right? Even though when you come here for my opinion. You don't come here for the facts. Of course, maybe you do. Maybe you do come here to get the facts that the corporate press just so happen to leave out. Because that's what I try to bring. I try to bring that. I try to fact check all this stuff, do a little bit of research while I can, and bring you the actual facts and not the skewed corporate press narrative. That's what I try to do. But for some reason, and I don't know how we got to this point, right? Like, maybe it's college. It's the fault of colleges across this country for spewing out and out-turning, nothing but Democrat activists. Because that's all these people are. Democrat activists. Why else would they skew stories in the way they do? What point do they have in trying to force you through manipulation to think the way they want you to think like them, right? Instead of just giving you the facts, instead of just upholding your integrity and saying, this is reality, this is what it is. But we think it might be something else. But no, They skew reality. They try to give you some BS. Now, I just love this though, because they pretty much prove that what JD Vance is saying is true. But it's really hard to derive that from what they say. But we're going to get into that. Let's keep going here. Vance also accused Walz of falsely claiming he had served in a combat zone while the Democratic vice presidential nominee was in the Army National Guard. While Walz retired 2 months before his unit received alert orders to deploy to Iraq, the attacks on Walz's military record are part of the race from both parties to define the relatively unknown governor after he was tapped Tuesday as Vice President Kamala Harris's running mate. Walz's 24-year military service is one of several facets of his background that appeal to voters that the Harris campaign is trying to reach with his selection, and that Republicans are trying to blunt by painting him as an out-of-touch liberal. As a matter of fact, he is out of touch with the vast majority of the country. A lot of his positions from abortion to transgender and all this garbage are just way out there. They're far left, right? They are very far left. But you like how they say he retired before they knew he was going to deploy. I'm sorry. Hang on. Hang on there for a second, corporate press. When you have a war going on, because at that time we had been at war, pretty much we didn't declare war because of BS reasons. And, we've got a lot to talk about in that, but I'm not trying to get into all that. But right, these National Guard units, they rotate, right? So, yeah, he knew that was coming up. He most definitely knew that was coming up. He definitely knew they were going to deploy. I happen to have a coworker who is 52, I think, right now, 52 or 53, something like that. As a matter of fact, he still serves in the National Guard. He's going to be forced to retire pretty soon. But he was talking about this. They know well beforehand that, yeah, they're going to be deployed well before, because they got to be prepared. They're going to know months and months beforehand to get prepared, get everything, you get your unit ready, but whatever to deploy. So, saying, that he retired 2 months before, I'm sorry. No, that's just, that doesn't line up with reality, right? It might be factually true, and that's something else the corporate press does. They'll say something that's factually accurate, but also very dishonest at the same time. It's called intellectual dishonesty. That's what that is. It's very dishonest. Walz and Vance, the two VP candidates, are both military veterans, unlike their running mates. You like how they just slide that little jab at Trump and Harris, by the way. Walz served in the Army National Guard for 24 years before retiring in 2005. He launched a campaign for Congress in Minnesota's 1st Congressional District that year and was elected in November 2006. At a campaign stop in Michigan on Wednesday, Vance accused Walz of abandoning his unit before it deployed to Iraq in 2006. And yeah, when you retire, yeah, you abandon your post. Now, you could argue, and I get it, I totally get it, you could argue that, hey, he served his 20 years. He's good to go. He could have retired 4 years prior to that. However, knowing that you're about to deploy and then you retire, yeah, there's room for that to be a genuine argument there, that he abandoned his unit. He's not one of these people that's going to be put out on the front lines. No, of course not. But that's an arguable point. I'll just say that. Trying to be as honest as I can, that's an arguable point. Yeah, he served his 4 years. He could have retired long before that. He knew we were at war, and war was coming up, and they would probably be deployed. Probably knew they were going to be deployed and retired. So, yes, it's not untrue for J.D. Vance to say that. You would have to know what was going on in the guy's head. It's an arguable point at best, not without evidence, right? That's another thing that the corporate press does all the time. They'll say something that only one person would know, and you can't verify it because only one person would know. And they'll say without evidence. Yeah, go ahead, corporate press. Try to sell that to somebody else. When the United States Marine Corps, when the United States of America asked me to go to Iraq to serve my country, I did. I did what they asked me to do. And I did it honorably, and I'm very proud of that service. When Tim Walz was asked by his country to go to Iraq, you know what he did? He dropped out of the Army and allowed his unit to go without him, Vance said. Yeah, that's exactly what he did. Yeah, that's not arguable. He most certainly retired, right? That's not an arguable point. So Vance saying that is a matter of opinion. Right, so what are they trying to debunk J.D. Vance's opinion? Yeah, he could easily say that. He quit because of the war. Didn't want to go to war. We know Tim Walz is very anti-gun. We know that for a fact. He's very anti-gun. As a matter of fact, I saw something in an article the other day. They were trying to say, and when I fact checked it wasn't true, so don't take any credence from this, but they were trying to put in an article that the NRA endorsed Tim Walz. Yeah, to the same guy, this very same guy who put red flag laws in Minnesota, as a matter of fact. Yeah, you think the NRA is going to endorse that? No, I'm sorry. That goes against the Constitution because you're stripping away a due process from gun rights, essentially, because that's what that does. And you'll get arguments from the left. No, it doesn't. No, they get due process after they get their guns taken away. It strips due process from gun rights. That's exactly what red flag laws do. They make sense in practice. Like, not in practice. They make sense on paper until you think about it for a second. Okay, let's look at what the due process is here. Okay, so they take your gun away, and then you have to fight to get it back. That is not how the Constitution was supposed to work, right? We need stronger family ties in this country to where when we see somebody who's mentally in distress and might go do something like that, we have enough guts to stand up and stop these people, to say, look, and maybe if they don't have access to guns, make sure those guns are locked up and safe from those people. But if they do have access to guns, make sure and talk to these people. Make sure to know. Right? Like, we need stronger family ties in this country. The left is trying to destroy families. That's what they're doing with gay marriage. And I know that's a hot take, right? Because I'm totally fine with that. But that's what they are trying to do. That is the end result. Right? Abortion. That's another one. Transing your kids. That's another one. Trying to dissolve the family unit. That's what they are trying to do with their policies. That's the only objective conclusion you could derive from their policies, by the way. Right? When you look at everything put together, you can only derive that Democrats hate their constituency because they want you to kill your kid, they want you to sterilize your kid, they want to take your guns away so you can't defend yourself, and they want criminals to go and rob you, right? Like, a lot of these Democrat states don't have like castle doctrine, which basically, if somebody breaks into your house in one of these Democrat states, and as a matter of fact, I had somebody in the comments argue with me on this, but if in some of these Democrat states, if somebody breaks into your house, you're expected to leave your house, right? If you shoot an intruder, that you don't know if they're there to kill you, they're there to rob you, take everything, rob you blind. You don't know what they're going to do. You don't know if that home invasion is their intent for them to murder you. You have no idea. So you're expected to just leave your house. That's what people like Tim Walz push. Leave your house. What? That's insane. Where are you supposed to go? I'm sorry. That just doesn't work for reality. There are evil people out there, and you must have the right to defend yourself. That's just basic common sense. Is it tragic? Very, very tragic, right? For somebody to get to the point to where they feel they need to break into somebody else's house for whatever reason, right? If they just want to steal a loaf of bread, you don't know why they're there. They have no right to be in your house. Zero right. So once they enter your house, they pretty much give up their rights. They have no more rights. But don't let the left will try to tell you otherwise. Oh, well, they're just disenfranchised from society or whatever. Don't blame them. blame the system because it's oppressive and all this other garbage. That's the garbage that they try to spew on everybody. It's crap. There's no logic behind it whatsoever. Walz retired from the Army National Guard in May 2005, according to the Minnesota National Guard. Typically, service members need to submit papers several months before they can retire. That's interesting. A National Guard article on his unit's deployment states that it received alert orders to deploy to Iraq in July 2005, 2 months after Walz retired. The unit first mobilized in the fall of 2005 to Camp Shelby, Mississippi to prepare for deployment according to the unit's history, and then deployed in March 2006 for 22 months, which the Guard said was the longest continuous deployment of any military unit during the U.S. operations in Iraq. Walz filed paperwork with the Federal Election Commission as a candidate for Congress on February 10, 2005. In his comments Wednesday, Vance also went after Walz for claiming he had served in combat, accusing the governor of being dishonest with his claims about his service. He said that and he was making a point about gun control, shouldn't allow weapons that I used in war to be on America's streets, Vance said of Walz. Vance pointed to a video promoted by the Harris campaign on social media Tuesday in which Walz is speaking about his decision to change his position and support an assault weapons ban after the Parkland shooting in 2018. We can make sure that those weapons of war that I carried in war is the only place where those weapons are at, Walz said in the video. I'm sorry, that's just a lie. Those people are lying about that. That gun that the Army issues you, that M16 or M4 or whatever you get, is not the same as this civilian version of an AR-15. Those are not the same weapons. So they are lying about that, outright lying about that. That is not the same weapon. Walz deployed with the Minnesota National Guard in August 2003 to Vicenza, Italy, as part of support for the U.S. war in Afghanistan, according to a Minnesota Guard spokesperson. He did not deploy to Afghanistan or Iraq or a combat zone as part of his service. In a statement, a Harris campaign spokesperson said, in his 24 years of service, the governor fired, and trained others to use weapons of war innumerable times. Governor Walz would never insult or undermine any American's service to this country. In fact, he thanks Senator Vance for putting his life on the line for our country. It's the American way. Vance served 4 years in the Marine Corps, an enlisted combat correspondent in public affairs, and deployed once to Iraq for roughly 6 months, according to his military record. He left service in September 2007 as a corporal. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre pushed back against Vance's criticisms when asked about them Wednesday. This is someone who enlisted at 17 years old to serve his country. He was part of the Army National Guard for 24 years. This is someone who was a high school teacher, right? Jean-Pierre said, a high school coach as well, who grew up in a small town in the Midwest, and so I think his bio speaks for itself. Who he is speaks for himself. His record speaks for itself. She's right about that. And I'm just going to say anything. I'm not going to say anything beyond that. Sorry for the mess ups, y'all. This is not the first time there have been criticisms of Walz's military record. The Minnesota governor was criticized for his exit from the National Guard in 2022 by his Republican opponent, who held a press conference with veterans in the final stretch of the campaign, according to the Star Tribune. At the time, Walz defended his service. We all do what we can. I'm proud I did 24 years, Walz told the Minnesota paper. I have an honorable record. The criticisms of his military record from within the state during his gubernatorial campaigns also focused on his rank when he retired. Imagine that. Ducking service. Right? I'm sorry, but the Army National Guard is not the same thing, right? Like, you got to give some respect to serving in the military, in any branch of the military, where it's the National Guard, whatever, doesn't matter. But, you know, like J.D. Vance deploying to Iraq with the Marine Corps, for crying out loud, is very different from serving 24 years in the National Guard. You're basically a civilian that plays Army man, for 2 weeks out of the year and for every other weekend. That's what they do. Sure, they do get deployed, but they are just logistical support, generally speaking. Not always. Not always. I know that. Because my friend, my coworker, he's not my friend, by the way. I don't really care for him too much, to be honest. But my coworker was in active combat. He had 2 tours in Iraq, as a matter of fact. 2 tours. Combat vet. Yeah. As a National Guard. But the vast majority of National Guardsmen never deploy. They're usually, like, when they do deploy to combat zones, they don't see active combat, generally speaking. Of course, you could also say that about a lot of Army and Marines and all this other garb, because, you know, you do have a lot of logistical, but for the Army, the National Guard does a lot of that logistical support. That's what they're there for. But, you know, this is all just arguable points, right? They're trying to go in at Walz and at every available angle. And I get it. I totally get it. The dude's a far leftist. How about you go after his record instead of his military service, right? Like, that's, to me, that's kind of a low blow, because you need a little bit of respect for these people, right? I didn't sign up. And to be honest with you, I regret not signing up. But my mentality at the time, I looked at it like, okay, you know, at the time, we were at war. And I looked at it like, no, I'm not going to Iraq, and I'm not going to go kill some Iraqis or anybody. I'm not killing anybody for the government of the United States. Are you crazy? I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to have murder on my conscience. However, I do look back at it now as that, you know, kind of naive. I was young at the time, and that's kind of naive. I didn't necessarily have to go into combat. I didn't have to be, you know, a frontline soldier. Could have done something else. But, you know, I do regret not joining the military. Outright, it's something I've thought about several times. I should have joined the damn military to serve my country with honor and pride. And that's something I do regret. So I have no room to talk about Tim Walz's military service, for crying out loud. But, however, it does sound like to me that he ducked out on his deployment to Iraq. That's what it sounds like to me. But, you know, let me know what you think. That's all I got for this one. I want to thank everybody for watching. Y'all try to have a good day. Stay legitical. Peace.